Welcome to EDOTCO Interx. What is this? EDOTCO Interx is an event where the community from the telco tower industry and like-minded professionals gather to discuss, deliberate, and ignite conversations that can help nations pursue their digital economy ambitions. So, COVID-19, that was unprecedented. The pandemic led to a massive increase in demand for remote health, remote learning, and working from home, resulting in higher network usage. As the economy recovers, there is a need for ubiquitous internet connectivity, which is reliable and affordable, and the need for equitable connectivity has never been more clearer nor more urgent. So governments and businesses must work together to make equitable connectivity a reality worldwide. So today we are here to discuss the role of TowerCos in providing connectivity in tandem with the needs of the community and businesses. My name is Freda Liu, and joining me today on the topic of building tomorrow's digital infrastructure in Asia are experts Tugay Yilmaz from IFC, that's the lady, Ahmad Ridhwan Azizan from Roland Berger, and Gayan Koralage from EDOTCO. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Okay, welcome everyone. This is such an interesting topic because this will basically change the nation, right? And change the world, right? I'm going to start with you, Ridhwan. You know, how has the telecom market dynamics changed in recent years, and what can be expected to change as 5G comes into the picture?
I think interesting point, if you really look at it, the global telecom industry is really at a crossroad these days. As you mentioned just now, especially accelerated by COVID, the data explosion is happening. Right. Globally, data has increased by 60% year on year over the last 5 years, and we don't see this slowing down. Right. But on the other hand, the operators are actually not getting the value from all this growth. So industry revenue is stagnant, and MNOs are actually facing a lot of revenue pressures, especially to cope with that demand, but also to prepare for the future, and that's where you talk about 5G coming in. So when 5G comes in, it's going to disrupt and really revolutionize the entire industry. You're really talking about a magnitude change in how network efficiencies and network functions come out. So you're talking about the ultra low latency, you're talking about high capacity throughput, you're really talking about massive IoT. All of this coming out, and this is going to unlock a lot of new use cases and quite a lot of different value that can be unlocked, especially in terms of industrial IoT and other cases such as AR, VR. But on the other hand, this doesn't come with no costs. It's a very expensive proposition, 5G, right. And I mean globally, Ericsson mentioned a ballpark figure of more than 1 trillion in total deployment, and the cost is actually higher than what they have been doing before, because you've got more needs, you've got higher throughput, you've got network densification, you have microsites and so forth. So really a lot of, I would say, investments. Right. Now, what has this been doing? This has really been changing industry dynamics. You're seeing a lot of happening or movement in industry. You see consolidation happening, what you see in Malaysia, you see more convergence, fiberization, right. And it's all driven by the fact that telecom operators or the industry is trying to find something that's sustainable for them. Right. In this kind of situation, we really see TowerCos and InfraCos really playing a pivotal role. And it's for a few things. The first is it can bring scalability and flexibility for industry, because it can allow, I would say, more efficient usage of assets. Mm-hmm. It brings efficiency, mm-hmm. because you have better energy movements, you have unlocking of the value of your stranded assets and so forth. Mm-hmm. And they know how to manage operations on an independent basis, so you can actually allow for sharing of assets. But to do this, I think there's a lot that TowerCos need to do, and they really need to, I would say, evolve away from what they were in the past. Right. They were just pure passive, I would call them landowners. Yeah. And going forward, they are actually going to need to evolve into next generation digital infrastructure providers. It means three things. First, it's more assets that you actually cover. It's no longer pure towers. You're going through fiber, small cells, edge data centers. You need to move up the value chain, right. towards active. And also that you need to put a full suite of services around that. So I really think that now's the time where TowerCos have a role to play.
Okay, right. You talk about moving up the value chain. Could you elaborate a little bit about this? And Gayan and Tugay, if you've got anything to add to that as well.
Maybe I'll start first and I'll let Gayan talk about what EDOTCO has been doing. I mean, especially with 5G, and you have a whole suite of new technologies coming in with O-RAN and vRAN, and everything is going to become a bit more decentralized. You need, there's a role to play to move away from just providing the passive infrastructure. So you're basically your brick and mortar, or in this case, what you call your steel and iron, towards the actual equipment, towards the actual active hardware, your baseband units, your radio units, your antennas, your edge data centers to provide that. So that's more moving up, I would call, the value chain. So that's one, and I think EDOTCO has a lot to say on going in that direction also.
Yeah, so adding on to that, but also Gayan, what is the benefit that EDOTCO has already brought in the markets it's in, especially for the market development, especially for your customers? What's been happening?
Yeah, I think if you take a step back a little bit, so we are in the business of providing communication, right? So telecom companies and infra suppliers and OEM vendors. So we are in the entire food chain from top to bottom. Two things happen, as you mentioned earlier: the data explosion taking place. COVID have accelerated the 5-year growth in 18 months. So say for example, Malaysia, we were 13 GB a customer a month. Average consumers on about screen time of about 6 hours a day. Now it's at 8.5 hours. We have doubled the data consumption to 26. So if you look at Indonesia, Philippines, Bangladesh, 2 times higher. It was 2 to 6 in Bangladesh. It was 6 to 12 in case of Philippines and Indonesia. So we were not expecting this data explosion. As you can see, we had to provide capacity for that. Telcos and TowerCos need to provide the capacity. So the capacity come in 3, 4, more spectrum, more towers in the, more antennas in the tower, and more towers. Now the top 2 things have happened. So the spectrum is a scarce commodity, so there's so much you can allocate. Telcos have done their very best to put up more antennas in the sites during this pandemic period. And now we are in this data explosion, and the number of towers required. And we see in Bangladesh, Pakistan, Philippines, Indonesia, amount of towers they require is huge, right? That creates 2 elements really. There's something called unconnected and then underconnected. Underconnected means that you do have a coverage, but your data speed is not so great, 5 Mbps and below. You may be surprised to hear that Malaysia alone, we have 7,000 to 10,000 dark spots.
Okay.
So dark spot is that it's a 100 meter by 100 meter, and data speed is 5 Mbps. Because when children are studying from home, working from home, you see that your data speed is small, right? Now this is where street furniture comes in. We, as an infrastructure company, have put more street furnitures, street poles near the residential areas to provide that coverage. So that's one element to that. Second element is unconnected. So if you look at our markets, 9 markets, there are about 900 million people, and roughly 40 to 60 million people doesn't have coverage at all.
Right.
Before pandemic, before we thought about digital economy as a core component of the national economy, because everything is going online now, not being connected was okay. It was acceptable. Now it's not. Internet connectivity is a basic human right as far as individuals are concerned. The fact that I don't have a connectivity, which means a violation of my human right. So even in the Malaysian context, you are now at 97%. So the 3% is not connected. That's about 1 million Malaysian doesn't have basic connectivity yet. That's why the governments, Malaysian government and Indonesian government and various governments have come with these government-funded programs to connect the last bit. Where the TowerCo play a role as well, and we are infrastructure suppliers out there. Coming back to your question about the cost per GB. So pandemic happened, data have exploded, affordability has come down. What can we do? We need to bring the cost per GB down, so that more people will have opportunity to become part of digital economy. So if you look at the cost per GB in our Asian market, it ranges from anything between 35 US cents to $1. It could be Bangladesh, could be 35 US cents to 1 US in Singapore. Now that's a range, right? Half of that is marketing costs, spectrum costs, and stuff like that. Balance are engineering cost, split into active and passive. So we are in the passive portion. So we are 25% of the cost of this, right? When we deepen the sharing, when we, let's say we share the tower among more than a single operator, then the cost comes down. Right. So the Malaysia industry co-location ratio is 1.6, which means every single tower have 1.6 times of occupants. If you can bring that to 2, large portion of cost can be saved. If you can bring to 2.5, even better.
Right.
If you can bring to 3, even better. So independent tower companies, what they do is you build a one tower and share among more than a single operator. Avoid overlap between the 2 towers so that we bring the cost per GB down.
Right.
Now, the second part of his question is, can we do more than towers? Answer is yes.
Okay.
There is a passive and there is active, and we are playing in the passive. We are tower power, field operation, truck rolling team. So that's where this innovation comes in. The active components are becoming disaggregated. That's where the next generation comes in. So the disaggregated, self-curing network. Can we play a role? Yes. Any element could be shared more than a single operator, something we can invest and bring the cost per GB down. So I think we can talk about more what element is shareable, what element is not, and what is that boundary between what should telco do and what TowerCo should do. That's a conversation. But I think, yes, deepening the sharing can bring the cost per GB down, connect the unconnected and underconnected.
Right.
That's the way
And
go
these
for.
are things that we've been talking about for the longest time, but I think the pandemic has brought up all these challenges, the needs of the human rights, as you were saying, to the surface, right?
Absolutely.
Right. So, okay, Tugay, given substantial benefits from to MNOs, what have been the factors impeding the uptake of TowerCos, and will these barriers hinder the potential uptake of new services such as active sharing models?
Yeah, so the good news is we don't need to convince anyone about the benefits of the TowerCos.
Right.
I think both by the regulators and the mobile operators, it's quite, everyone knows. The challenge and the question is what type of a regulatory framework, what type of a market structure creates the success? Because it's not that just sharing the towers and allowing it results in success. We need to make sure that the right players are coming into the markets, and the regulatory framework is structured in a way that allows some flexibilities when it comes to, because this is an evolving market and the technology is evolving. But at the same time, the rules are also clear, as Gayan was mentioning, some of the who does what and what is your responsibilities, where you, as an infrastructure operator, where you should be focusing on. These also needs to be clear. Just to give a couple of examples, what we are seeing in some of the markets, there are still a lot of limitations. In terms of foreign ownership limitations, in terms of number of license limitations. So what we are looking at it is much more, for example, not limiting, but looking at it more from a perspective how we can bring the best players, how we can make sure that the players can evolve and also can deliver. We always say, please do not limit the number of TowerCo licenses, because there is nothing scarce as spectrum. What we advise is just put qualifications for the licensing. That what type of qualifications a TowerCo needs to have in order to obtain the license, so you can create a very healthy market. The other thing is what we are seeing in the markets, there's a lot of challenges related to what we call enabling infrastructure. Because as we have all mentioned, the sector is evolving, and there's a technology upgrades which requires more power, more fiber, which is not just a tower. So it is a lot of other elements that are combining it. So that is very key. Then we come to the permits. This is another issue that we have been seeing a lot of challenges in our market. You have a great regulatory framework, but how are you going to implement it? So it comes down to a lot of different elements. So it needs to be very well thought through. And I want to emphasize, and I'm actually a little bit disagreeing with when we say the TowerCos, the traditional model is a simple business. Actually, we don't look at it that way. It's actually quite a complex business already. For example, as an investor, when we look at a TowerCo, who to select, who to invest, we always look at the experience. We always look at it cannot be just a simple real estate business. It needs to have a mindset of innovation. It needs to have a mindset of how to manage the capital. So these are really important elements. So that's why, coming back to what I said in terms of what type of regulatory frameworks we want, it really comes down to who you license, how you define a qualified player. And looking forward, what you are mentioning now is the sector is evolving. Where we see TowerCos, what they can do more, and also what type of regulatory framework we need. Innovation is key, and I think both having flexibilities but have some type of quality controls is also very important for our sector. But I think it's very clear that if you have the right players in the market who innovate, who can bring the capital, who can invest, not just on the investment, but also on the human side, the human capital. So those will be, I think, will create the enabling elements for the market and for the atmosphere. So this is kind of how we see it. It's not just the right regulatory framework, but how you implement it, and also are you bringing the right players, and all of them are kind of tied to each other.
So Ridhwan, she disagreed with you.
I always agree with disagreements.
Okay. Do you have anything to rebut to what she just said?
Oh, I agree with her in the sense, but what I would say, it is always a matter of degree. Right. It is simpler compared to the future of what you are going to have in terms of next generation digital infrastructure providers, because
that's absolutely, I agree.
On a relative scale.
Yeah, right. No, I absolutely agree that the sector is becoming more complicated. The energy needs of the sector, the other, as I mentioned, enabling structure. But I think one thing is really experience in the sector is really important, and we are seeing more and more markets that are opening up are looking for players who have experience in other markets. So it's not a simple model. So I just wanted to make sure to correct that. Yeah.
Thank you. I stand corrected.
All right. Okay. And there I was hoping for a bigger fight. Anyway, Ridhwan, what are the potential values TowerCos bring to the table by advancing the role from TowerCos to InfraCos?
All right. So I mean, if you were to look at it, to break it down, there are benefits that it brings to different stakeholders. So the one that is most direct, if I were to say it, are the benefits it can bring to MNOs or the telecom operators themselves. So TowerCos, and by advancing into InfraCos, actually have an opportunity to increase the efficiency of the, I would say, the operations and the businesses of these, I would say, these operators, both because they can obtain savings in terms of capex and opex. You don't need to deploy as much. Right. You have more efficient capex, more energy efficient towers, and so forth. It allows, I would say, faster network rollout because the towers are there, so just deploy. You don't need to build the civil structures and so forth. And interestingly, it also allows these operators to unlock the value of some of their assets. If you look at the kind of valuations that these assets bring and the interest that they have for investors such as PEs and so forth, it actually allows certain monetizations of the assets. And this is, I think, can be quite substantial also. The second, I would say, aspect of benefits that it can bring is really more towards, I would say, the national digital agenda and also to consumers. A recent study by IFC, really looking at that, showed that the presence of TowerCos in a market, and over here they took 55 markets, which were, I would say, low and emerging TowerCo markets, economies, sorry. Right. It's actually pronounced. TowerCo presence, a strong developed TowerCo presence improves first mobile internet penetration, mobile internet speed, mobile internet affordability, and also I would say the competition within the industry, and all of this having a direct correlation actually to GDP growth. So usually what you see is 1% an increase in internet penetration increases GDP by 0.2 percentage points. So this is really a very strong correlation. Thirdly is, and we're moving into a world of sustainability. I mean, I was just watching that day, glaciers just melting away. So, you know, if you really think about it, the telecom industry is actually one of the biggest consumers of energy and one of the biggest emitters of carbon footprint. An average tower in Asia is roughly 30 metric tons annually, just running the site operations. And deploying and constructing it also has its own costs, between 55 to 85 metric tons. TowerCos actually have been leading the innovation in trying to reduce this, both from energy efficiency, from sourcing of renewables, and also through finding, I would say, alternative materials and local supply chains to really reduce that footprint. So all in all, and I think we looked at the impact across 9 emerging markets in Asia, and these things are substantial. between up to 10 billion in, I would say, savings for MNOs. More than 67 billion in, I would say, benefits to National Digital Agenda and consumers, whether it's from, I would say, savings because you pay less for your internet, but also because of additional GDP growth, and up to 17 million metric tons annually in, I would say, carbon footprint, just because of the fact that you don't build and that you have more efficient towers. So it's substantial, and I think it's something that should be grabbed and realized if possible.
Right. I think it also connects back, like you say, to our national digital agenda of being high income nation. That comes with modernization, right? I'm just putting it very, very simply, right? So, Gayan, TowerCos are transforming its business models, and so how is EDOTCO changing its business model to suit the new environment, and what will it take to transform successfully? I guess just share with us what EDOTCO has done well, and challenges faced, and what are the gaps still there?
So the question on TowerCo versus InfraCo, I need to address the elephant in the room. Which one is simpler? Which one is complicated? Traditional TowerCo is not a simple model. We erect a tower, 42 meter, and we provide a space in the tower, and allow uptime is 99.9% of the time, which means that allowed downtime for a month is about 4 minutes. So when I charge a monthly rental, I can only down a site for 4 minutes. I need to figure out truck rolling, preventive maintenance, corrective maintenance, all that happen on time. Battery need to be in a good condition. Rectifier has to be in a good condition. Grid has to be available. So it's not a simple model as such. It's just that the complex situation of a telco is being outsourced to us. And now it's up to us to manage it from end-to-end perspective. I'll tell you how it's become complicated. Now in the 5G world, you need finite uptime. So the 4 minutes downtime will lower to 4 seconds a month, which means that I need to figure out downtime before it happens. Incident need to be forecasted. We need to have vehicles on the location before incident take place.
Right.
And also we are talking about not just macro towers. In a 5G world, spectrum in the mid and high band, the intercell gap is down to 100 meters. So there are street furniture, the poles, balconies and stuff like that. So we are dealing with large amount of structures which require finite uptime. And thirdly, the power requirement. So the energy requirement move from 3 kilowatt to 10 kilowatt or more than that. So we need to figure out in a complex place where our grid is not 100% available, in most of our Asian markets not 100% there, how do you provide 10 kilowatt at a 4-second downtime a month? So that's where this traditional TowerCo business become complex.
Right.
So that's why we need to have AI, digital planning, digital thinking. So that's why the whole thing become complicated. Now, moving from a traditional TowerCo to InfraCo, the food chain include fiber last mile, small cell, edge computing, maybe antenna as a service. This is where this boundary between telco and the TowerCo we have to think through, right? Traditionally, the antennas are proprietary for telecom operators. Now that is becoming disaggregated, software defined. So therefore, it becomes a commodity, and it can be shared among more than a single operator. So then technically, it could add to the TowerCo, and then we can put a single antenna can be shared. Edge, where you need to have high latency. Facebook, this next generation of Facebook, so the world have about 3 billion. The next generation of Facebook, about 1 billion people. Instead of looking at the internet, we are inside the internet. So that require roughly about 5 milliseconds, so that most of our site need to be converted to edge, which means more than a single operator can be shared. So that could be with us. So similar to that, so there are various elements of the active space, we call it next gen or infra space, could be with us. Globally, we have roughly 8 billion towers, 8 million towers, of which about 85% is owned by the TowerCos. And then these 85%, the other elements could be also be part of TowerCo, and then we can deepen the sharing and bring the cost per G down. So I think it's more to do with the next 10 years outlook.
Right.
Yeah. So just want to give you a glimpse of how the next 10 years is going to look like. Instead of 25 GB, you will be using 100 GB. You will have devices wearing which measure your body temperature, health record. Your cars will be connected to your phone. Your in-taps will be communicating with each other. that all add to your per capita data consumption. That's how, it's not time you are going to spend, it's the quality of your time, and then the devices connected to you will be connected as well. So you are a 100 GB customer a month person, and we are now at 25, so we are making it 4 times.
Right.
And when I make it 4 times, cost per GB cannot proportionally go by 4 times. It should be coming down.
Right.
My share of the wallet has to be lower because, as you mentioned earlier, internet is a basic human right. If it is expensive, it's violation of human right as well. So moving from TowerCo to Telco will demystify and solve that cost matter, the economic matter. And it has to be shared among multiple operators, and then TowerCo in a good position to do that.
Okay, I'm chewing on that. Okay, so Tugay, can you please tell us about IFC's initiatives to advance digital connectivity by developing and funding practical solutions that enable further connectivity in emerging markets? Maybe elaborate more, on the collaboration's motivation, approach, and objective. Right? You can tell us about that.
So everything we are talking about, I think the most important thing for IFC is connecting the unconnected and narrowing the digital divide. Because today, it's especially after the COVID-19, it's not that digital exclusion means that you're also socially excluded and also you're economically excluded. So we cannot allow the digital divide to get wider, but we need to narrow it down. So this is our goal, especially, and from the telecom sector and the telecom practice, what we are looking at is infrastructure sharing. And why infrastructure sharing is really important for us is, and it's not just, as Gayan mentioned, it's not limited to just sharing the tower, but it's sharing the entire digital infrastructure. And why it is important is it addresses our 2 important mandates. One is the affordability and the other one is the sustainability. So without infrastructure sharing, we won't be able to provide an inclusive growth because as Gayan has been mentioning, the cost is going up, right? And we need to keep the cost affordable. But the technology needs to go up. So you are providing a much better service, but you're trying to keep the costs the same, which is really difficult. Right. And the only way, and in the past this was one of the ways, but today actually it's the only way to share the infrastructure. So we are very much aligned on that, and what we are doing is, of course, we are financing the projects where we see a clear mandate of infrastructure sharing. But the other thing, we actually take a little bit of a different, how I can say is, we a little bit widen our scope. We are not just finding good projects, good companies who are providing the services, but we also have this element that is upstream. And we are looking at the sector much more, where else we can help and where we can interfere earlier. So what we have done, for example, a couple of years back, we looked at all the countries and we mapped out where are the gaps, like why one country has higher connectivity, why the other one is providing the same service much more affordable, what are the differences? And we really try to understand the gaps in each market. Okay. And most of the time what we come up with was either the regulatory framework, or it was either what we were talking about, the enabling infrastructure, and now with the sustainability perspective, it also includes not just energy and grid connectivity, but also renewable energy, availability of renewable energy, and availability of fiber. So we looked at it from a much more, I think, a wider scope, and we understand that our role is not just financing and providing the money and the capital, but interviewing much more earlier and creating these markets, helping to create the environment and the markets so that we can have successful infrastructure sharing, not just infrastructure sharing and failed models, but really make sure that we reach what we target. One is sustainability, the other one is inclusive growth, narrowing the digital divide. And of course, making everything still remaining affordable.
Right, okay. I just want you to elaborate a little bit about the regulatory framework, what did you see, right? And this is a question, I guess, for everyone as well. Who can we emulate what can we emulate for companies, for countries that have managed to get right? Maybe I'll start with you, Tugay, because
sure. I think it's a matter of, I think as I mentioned, all the regulators are quite aware of the importance of infrastructure sharing. And every market right now where they are is very different from each other. So the rules are different, where they are starting in terms of the frameworks are different, how many number of players they have are different, and priorities in each market is different. So that's why we are seeing differences. And one of the, I can give a couple of examples. I think foreign ownership restrictions have been quite a challenge for infrastructure operators, because we are talking about a new sector, so we are trying to attract new players into our markets, but we face a foreign ownership limitation. There is always a requirement for a local partnership, which actually most of our operators do choose to go with a local partner because it do help. But when you enforce it, it creates problems.
Right.
So this is one of the problems that we see in the regulatory framework. The other one that we see is limiting the number of licenses. For example, not allowing competition in the market, because competition is quite important for the TowerCos. I know we have discussions with EDOTCO as well, that in some of the markets they actually welcome competition, right? You want other players to come in. So it is really important. So those type of gaps we have realized in regulatory frameworks, or a understanding of a little bit of a challenge in terms of which service belongs to which category. I think that has been also a bit of a challenge. Too much providing exclusivities to some of the players, and both in terms of their scope of their license, but also in terms of the number of players again. So these type of things, I think they are all come with good intentions and to help the sector, but when you have too much limitations, it just creates problem in the future.
Can I just add to that? So I think, Tugay, I'm 80% with you on that. The reason the 20% I'm not with you is that these are capital intensive projects. Yeah. So it's $100,000, $80,000, $100,000 US dollars a piece, a tower. And most likely these are FDIs to emerging market. So there's a return expectation as well. So these need to be signed like 10, 12-year contracts. So that's something we cannot compromise, because the investor need to recover that money. In most cases, when you invest in a tower and you charge a lease fee for a 10-year single operator, they don't recover the cost and the cost of capital. It'll be a below water deal. So you get the second and third tenant, only then you make money. So therefore, if the market have unlimited number of players and there's a possibility to have an undercut of the lease fee, and then economics goes down. So I think we had to strike a balance of fully open up versus fully closed. I think that's the balance I mentioned. I think TowerCo principle is a capex OpEx recovery need to be recovered, may not necessarily from one operator, from the second operator. There should be regulation and governance about overlaps. They should not allow sites next to each other. I mean, if you go to any highway in Malaysia, you see any roof, any building top, you have 2 towers. Any hilltop, you have 2, 3 towers. That's the history. Right. We can quantify how much of dollar been wasted for that and add to the cost per JB. But I think the fair regulation need to strike the balance of investor not protected, where it's open for everybody, and investor is somewhat protected for their capital.
Yeah. So in terms of that, I agree with you for not to allow everyone, but I think going back to what I mentioned earlier, really having a licensing regime that provides the licensing to the right players. Right. So having those qualifications is really important. So this is what we advise. We don't say to provide a license to anyone who comes and asks for it, but really have qualifications in your license, and any serious player that meets that qualification is not going to do that, right? It's not going to jeopardize the market. So that really comes back to, I think, that how you limit, not in terms of the numbers, but you limit it by qualifications. You define what you think a TowerCo is, and how the player, what type of experience it needs to have, what type of capital structure it needs to have, so that they can come in and deliver the competitive market structure.
Okay, I will get a key takeaway from each of you and maybe one crucial next step. We'll start with you, Ridhwan.
Okay, I think maybe what I'll do is, as a key takeaway, I think first thing is in this region, TowerCo penetration is still lagging, I would say, as a whole, and we need to catch up. So I think that's the first one.
Right.
In order to do so, my opinion, I think there are 5 things that come into play, 5 building blocks that regulators should look at. The first is, in order to make sure that there is the mandate and the support for a very overarching digital infrastructure mandate is needed that covers the obligations, the roles that need to be played, but also importantly how you bridge that digital divide and how you can make it economically feasible also. So that's one. Second is the conducive licensing and ownership, and I think that ties back to Ai's point. So that you have the right players come in, but also that the right players come in and they have the comfort level that this won't be taken away from them, and it is something that is not onerous.
Right.
Third is really about the guidelines and promotion of sharing, because you can put all the TowerCos that you want inside there, but if your operators don't want to share or they are not induced to share, you have wasted assets. Must share. It's like what you teach your kids, all right? Always sharing is caring, all right?
Okay.
And fourth, is really about the whole processes around it, because if you can have the right regulation, but as Tugay said, if it's not implemented well, if you have issues in permit and issues of securing sites, it takes too long. You need 20,000 papers to just get one site. It's pointless.
Right.
And last, I think, is that flexibility to enable adjacencies. A TowerCo is not just a pure real estate play. You need to have the flexibility to enable them to expand into other places, be it active sharing or other assets or whatnot. So I think that's in a nutshell. And today, I think the time is right. Regulators should relook at their policies and see if there's anything that needs to be done.
Okay. Tugay?
So I think the key takeaway is post-COVID-19, actual digital economy become even more important. And in order to develop a digital economy, you need digital infrastructure. And in our markets, especially in emerging markets, to keep the service affordable, we need to have infrastructure sharing. So that's a must. And but we are no longer able to stop at just affordability and infrastructure sharing. But the key aspect of the growth today is sustainability. Okay. How sustainable is the because the technological growth and evolvement is going to continue. Yeah. And how sustainable is this? And we really need to find ways to make it sustainable. I tell my friends, internet is not just charging your phone. There is so much energy on the back of it that is like we really need to find the solution to make sure that it is sustainable. And right now at IFC, it's our key focus, making it both affordable and sustainable and inclusive. So connecting the unconnected.
Sustainable and inclusive. Gayan.
I think 2 aspects to that. One is what should industry should do, and what does the TowerCo should. I think we should spend more time on the TowerCo as a community. We are also a big community, right. Tower industry. The industry as a whole we have to be conscious that what next 8 years of this decade is 4 times of what we have done for the last 35 years. Yeah. Simply put, 25 GB today will become 100 GB by end of the decade. So we have to build 4 times the capacity. Now that's 4 times the cost. So that how do you get there? And the type of capacity different. It's inside the internet. You are going to experience things inside the internet, not looking at the internet. So that the entire quality of the parameters of the network has to change as well. But I will talk a little bit about the tower industry. Of course, we can do next gen, but our main focus area, we have to be focused extremely carefully. We need to deploy sites faster. If the deployment time is 60 to 90 days, we have to cut it down. Whether working with the government agencies that need to digitize the approval process, working with them is something we should definitely do. We should think about tower design, optimize the tower design. Metal quantity has to come down so that we can bring down the monthly fee as well. Thirdly, the 5G need about roughly 8 to 10 kilowatt. I don't think we are ready for that. We need to think about better batteries beyond the current battery capacities. So that innovation in the battery technology become quite critical as well. Digitization, AI-based planning, looking at the location, what operator wants before they ask you. So you can do the planning on their behalf based on various tools available. So I think we need to take this game to the next level. Right. That's what the tower industry has to do. In that whole ecosystem, if there's opportunity for us to move from traditional towers to the next gen, I think we should take that opportunity. If there is a fiber opportunity, we should definitely take that. I think that overall bring the cost per GB down as an industry. So that's my key takeaway. Hard work ahead of us, tough decision has to be made, and industry, telcos, TowerCos, OEM vendors, government and the regulators has to work together collectively to make that happen.
Right, so working together and hard work ahead of us. Just a quick summary of what you've all just said, right? We've got to deploy sites faster, optimize tower design. We talk about sustainability, that's important moving forward, and we need to catch up. I think that's your message as well, and that sharing is caring. So anyway, thank you, Gayan, Ridhwan, Tugay. Now, if you have any questions, right, please post them here. Right, and we'll get back to you. Also, for more updates on Interx, please follow EDOTCO's social media pages. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.